How beautiful, fam. I am receiving a morning transmission, and it's showing me the mechanics of thought creation, the mechanics of how the personality works in the brain, and so on. So I'm going to share some metaphors and visuals that I am being shown to give us a deeper understanding of the mechanics of how thought works within us, so that we can use the mechanics to continually have a better understanding of ourselves from a mechanical perspective. So, right now, I'm just witnessing, here's how the visual goes. And here's a process we could work with. So when we wake in the morning, or when we rise, when we are coming to our conscious awareness of the day, thoughts begin emanating in our mind, our head. So what the guidance is showing right now, it's showing me the brain, and it's showing me the brain in kind of this aquamarine color, and it's lit up and it's holographic. It looks kind of techy, how you might see it in a video. So the guidance is showing me the brain inside of the head, like that. And that it is an electromagnetic antenna, meaning that it attracts things, it draws things get pulled into it or towards it. So if we think of our body like an antenna on an old TV or a radio, the tip of our head is the tip of the antenna. So that is where we are drawing things in. That's where we're tuning into the frequency of thought, like a radio station. So thoughts come in packages and morphogenic fields. And depending on where we hold our vibration, and depending on the structure of our personality and our blueprint, that is where our attunement goes. So let's say we have the 45th gene of communion as our primary gene, and in the shadow frequency, it's about structures based in hierarchy, structures based in fear. And as long as there is, in those structures based on fear, they're based like pyramids. And so there's one person at the top, an elite person at the top, and then everyone is beneath that person in rank and order. Of course, this doesn't exist any longer in our creation. And yet the guidance is just giving us a piece to work with to get a sense of the mechanics of how our bodies work. So in the shadow frequency of the 45th gene, also it's about the black sheep of the family or of a community or a tribe. So when we have a hierarchical structure, as long as there is Well, the way the hierarchical structure works is to scapegoat on someone in the tribe. They become the black sheep, the one that everything gets pinned on, because in a pyramidal structure, there always has to be someone at the bottom because there's someone at the top. That's polarity and duality. Once again, it doesn't exist anymore, but this does help us to get handholds into mechanics for ourselves. It's kind of like once we're in grade 12, grade 1 doesn't really exist anymore, but some of the learnings from grade 1, the foundational learnings, might be brought back into our awareness to get an even more advanced perspective of algebra or math in grade 12. So we drop back to the basics. Okay. So the scapegoat is where the whole society will place their negative energy in the shadow frequency, and that allows that structure to exist. So that is a morphogenic field of thought. The 45th gene, every gene has its own morphogenic field. And a morphogenic field is a powerful energetic field. Let's think of it like a sphere or an orb. And that sphere, like a bubble, when you take dish soap and you blow it through the little hoop and you get bubbles floating around. This is a great metaphor for the morphogenic field. We could create a dictionary at the Unity Transmissions, and we would give it a new name other than dictionary, because dictionary dictated. So we could just give it, we could call it expression of terms. So we could, or even better, we could call it metaphors. Because metaphors allow us the visual or a comparison to get a better understanding of things. So morphogenic fields are like those soap bubbles floating around in the air, and when you come into contact with them, they go pop. And let's just say that that information in that morphogenic field goes into our head. If our antenna comes into contact with one of those bubbles and they go pop, that's like receiving the download of everything contained inside of that bubble. And everything in that bubble, morphogenic field, is a field of connected thoughts that create an actual consciousness. It's not just one word, it's a whole archetypal field of consciousness. And an archetype is like a character. An archetype is like a quality. An archetype in a simple form would be like a crayon color. So we could say we have a whole bunch of bubbles floating around that are like different crayon colors. Let's say the bubbles all have different colors. Those different colors are the qualities of that morphogenic field. So, all these morphogenic fields floating around, and we go back to the gene on communion, because each gene is a morphogenic field in itself. So it contains everything within it. This is like a seed. A seed contains the tree. A tiny little seed contains the entire tree. One bubble creates the entire thought consciousness of a gene. One gene contains the shadow, or we could call it the root frequency beneath the surface, all the way up to the branches of the tree, or the seedy, the highest frequency. So it's holographic. Everything is inside that one bubble, that one gene, that morphogenic field. And those morphogenic fields combined are what make our blueprint. So each one of us has a unique blueprint with a unique combination of the bubbles, a unique combination of the morphogenic fields, a unique combination of archetypes or qualities or characteristics. So the 45th gene in the shadow frequency is about structures based on fear and domination in the shadow frequency, called hierarchies. And in the seedy, or the highest frequency, it's about communities or societies that are transcendent of money in totality. So this is a very significant gene because it is very significant in our expansion of human consciousness on the earth in this miracle. We're moving into the higher frequencies to come into collaborative partnerships, collaborative projects, collaborative groups that share gifts and create synergy. Synergy is energy. And those collaborations source a greater energetic, the energetics of the quantum field itself, which is infinite, super abundant. So this is what is occurring on the planet at this time. So let's go back to the mechanics of our individual self so we can continue to learn how to navigate ourselves like perfectionists, like perfects, I call it. That's my word for mastery. Perfectionism. Perfect. So as we learn to perfect ourselves inside of our blueprint, we learn along the way. And the Gene Keys book by Richard Rudd, as I often mention, is a great way to learn more about the qualities of our blueprint or our personality, our unique design. And we are not our design. It is the car we're driving. So as we learn about the car we're driving, we transcend it, or we move into a more expanded version of it. It's like we're driving down the road in a car, and suddenly, because we become perfectly aligned with the car and all the aspects of it, our car transforms into a light ship. That's what's occurring for us in the miracle. So we are inside these amazing human vessels that have the capacity to metamorphosis into something that operates in more expansive ways If you think of the human body as having an aura, which is an energy field around it, which is also like a bubble, that is our personal morphogenic field. And that morphogenic field is most affected by the area of the body of the heart. The heart is the largest electromagnetic field of the body, and it emanates outward around us in all directions, creating a sphere, an energetic sphere around us. Now, if we are in a very low frequency, our energy field is not really functioning. And the energy field is like a bubble. It's like we can exist inside of that bubble. I call it self-sustaining, self-regulating, self-generating when the energy field is operating properly. So this is all part of Flight Lessons 101 and the mechanics of our light shifts, the mechanics of our bodies that we are in, the mechanics of our vehicle, which is our personal self or our personality, which is our body, which is our energy bodies, spiritual, mental, emotional, physical. So we have to, there's no has-tos, but it's about being equipped with the wisdom of the mechanics of our flesh suits. I say we stepped into these bodies, and at one point we left the owner's manual behind. So this is the owner's manual, the 10 easy steps of stepping into the quantum field. Step number 1 is remembering how to turn the car on, and that's the activation of the energy body or the auric field. So, once again, if we are operating at a low frequency, it's like there's not enough energy in the battery to get the car started. So we use various techniques like whole brain state. When the brain is operating in a whole brain state, the brain has 2 hemispheres. And when the 2 hemispheres are not working together, it's like 2 dogs on the same leash pulling in opposite directions, and one stops and one goes. And you've seen sometimes 2 dogs that are sharing a leash, and that's what happens. They don't have a very steady walk together, but that's what gets them working together eventually. And when they do, then they can walk smoothly together. Sometimes you see dog walkers who have 10 or 12 dogs on leashes all walking together, and they walk together smoothly. So this is the same with the 2 hemispheres of the brain. Flight Lessons 101 begins with the simple technique of knowing how to balance the brain and still the internal waters. We're made up of water. Most of our body is water. So the expression that I use is stilling the emotional waters of the body. That's like that 12 dogs that the dog walker is walking. The dog walker is emanating a frequency or a vibration such that it is a signal that brings all of the dogs into balance and harmony together. And so that's also what we're doing inside of ourselves, is coming into a state of balance to emanate a frequency to still the internal waters, to still what is going on inside of the self. So what is it that requires stilling? Well, when we are walking antennas and we live in a collective sea of energy and a collective sea of life forms, we are picking up and receiving signals all around us. Now, there isn't really anything going on outside of us. It just looks like there is. And so part of the process of self-perfection is, first of all, realizing there is nothing outside of us. So we go through phases. We, first of all, experience ourself as separate from all the things outside of us. And that's one phase of learning. And as we go along in the learning, we start to realize that we affect the world around us. And as we come into that state of realization, something inside of us takes a quantum leap in understanding, which is that we and the outside world are connected. So inside of that realization, the consciousness takes another quantum leap to then understand that if we can affect the world outside of us, maybe the place to focus is just the world within us. When we take that quantum leap, then we begin to realize there is nothing outside of us. So these are all steps on the ladder of discovering ourselves inside of the vehicle called human. Now, as we begin to say, there really is nothing outside of me, it is all me. It's all my creation. This is a very expansive quantum leap, because at this point we begin to take complete responsibility for our world. Pause and breathe and receive. As we begin to realize it is all our beautiful, magnificent creation, then we seek greater tools. Now we are becoming the artist of our reality, the artist of our world, the artist of our creation. This is a very rich and playful place to be. So let's jump back to the mechanics of our individual flesh suits and some more metaphors of how they work. The heart is the largest electromagnetic field around the body. So you can think of the heart pumping, and it is creating a field, an orb, a bubble that expands out all around the body. We are inside our own bubble. So in order to get that bubble strong and functioning properly, the first piece is to learn inner stillness and balancing those hemispheres of the brain, like the two dogs on the leash example. When the two dogs on the leash are walking harmoniously together, they can have a great walk. When they are not in balance and harmony, when the hemispheres of the brain are not in balance and harmony, our experience inside us and everything we perceive outside of us and the energy that we emanate from within to the outside of us is exactly like two dogs pulling in two different directions on the same leash. It's a very erratic experience. It's a stop-start. It's a push-pull. And that's what happens inside of us. And that's what happens in the waters of our body when the hemispheres are not balanced and aligned. So we share simple techniques to balance the hemispheres of the brain. The most simple ones are crossing our ankles and crossing our wrists and closing our eyes and clasping our hands together and deep breathing. Or placing both hands on our heart and closing our eyes in deep breathing. Or giving ourselves a good hug with our arms crossing over our chest and hugging and holding ourselves with our eyes closed and deep breathing. Or crossing our arms over our chest, closing our eyes, and tapping our arms back and forth alternately, which also balances the hemispheres of the brain. Each hemisphere of the brain affects the opposite side of the body, and that's why when we use opposite sides of the body simultaneously and alternatively, meaning the way our arms and legs move when we walk, they're moving together simultaneously and alternating their direction. When we do things like this, it gets both sides of the brain working together, just like the dogs on the leash. They have to learn to work together. As the brain begins to come into balance, then our auric field, the electromagnetic frequency emanating from our heart, can begin to expand and build and get stronger. And the auric field is where our information is coming from. It gives us a more expansive consciousness because it is collecting information from a more expansive field. We become a larger antenna when our auric field is operating properly. In fact, we become a different kind of antenna. If you think about the original example of the antenna, we're talking about an antenna that is long with the receiver on the very tip. That's the head. Now, when the heart is expanding, when the heart field is expanding because the hemispheres of the brain come into alignment, then we become like those microphones you see, those round spherical microphones that sometimes people use for podcasting or recording from all directions. The microphones are round, and that is what our auric field becomes like, is one of those round microphones, and we begin to receive more information from all directions around us, 360 degrees. So, let's go back to that image I shared in the brain when we began. I said that I was being shown the brain as like an aquamarine color. There's a beautiful butterfly called the morphe. And if you imagine that color of the butterfly as our brain, you could even put that butterfly directly inside of our head, and it would look very similar to the shape of our brain. So let's go back into those two hemispheres of the brain. This is a really good exercise to do when we're lying down, and it's a great one to do when we wake in the morning, because when we rise in the morning, meaning when our energy or our awareness rises and returns to the external world, rises up from our internal journey in our rest, we begin to have awareness, conscious awareness right away, and thoughts start going through our head. And a lot of the thoughts, if we are not consciously aware, are thoughts that are coming into us from a place of the unconscious, meaning we may be picking up on a lot of data that we don't really want to be emanating from us. So it's about learning to be conscious in every miracle, every moment. So to do a little process every morning when we wake is a great way to stay on top of what we are allowing to pass our radar. If we lie still in the bed when we wake in the morning, we can begin by just tuning in to see what is going on. Just like watching a movie or a television, or like watching nature pass in front of our eyes. It's like sitting at the side of a river and just watching the river go by. That's how we can start our mornings. Just still and witness what is floating by. Not like we own it or not like it's real. Just see what's floating by in the river when we wake in the morning. The field is filled with consciousness, with thoughts, with energies, with belief, with symbols, with life. We are living in a sea that is teeming with thought consciousness. So just wake and be still, arms at the side, hands touching the body, heels touching and feet falling open, and tune in to see what is flowing by. As we start to tune in, now we can connect in to our beautiful brain in that aquamarine turquoisey color, that morphogenic field, or the morphe inside of our head called our brain. Just begin to connect in to the brain as though it is that color. It's a perfect color for magnetism, because that's what our brains are doing, is magnetizing thought towards them. Now, based on the frequency that we are emanating from our body, is what determines which thoughts we draw towards us. Raising our vibration draws different thoughts towards us. Raising our vibration has to do with our kundalini, and our kundalini is our energy inside. It's like there is this golden pillar of light, a column of light or white light that rises up through the center of our body. Just think of it like a column that goes from the perineum, which sits right at the center, the base, where our tailbone comes into our body. Just right around that place. It's really the center of our pelvis at the bottom. That is where the column sits. And we have energy coiled around that column like a garden hose is coiled up at the base of our energy column. So, in order to rise that energy up, it would look like us unraveling that garden hose and pulling it through the central column that goes up the center of the body. Let's say that we wanted to use the metaphor of the coiled garden hose. And let's say we have to run it through a tube to get it from one side of the garden to the other. Let's say we didn't want the garden hose laying on the top of the lawn because we don't want anyone stepping on it. So we create a tube under the lawn to get the garden hose from one side of the garden to the other. In this case, it is from the bottom of the garden at the base of our spine to the top of our garden, which is the top of our head, our crown. So that tube of energy goes from the bottom of us to the top. And we're going to run that garden hose through the tube to get it from the top of our garden, from the bottom of our garden to the top. If you think about a tree, the roots of the tree sit in the soil at the bottom. And we could call that the shadow frequency. The shadow frequency is just the darkness between the darkness in the soil where the roots grow, where the roots sit. So the shadow is where the seed sits beneath the surface of the earth. And it sits beneath the surface of the earth, gaining energy. The earth moves around it and places pressure on it, just like our shadow does. That is a vibration that creates pressure beneath the surface for the seed to open, to reveal the entire tree that lives within it. So the seed begins to germinate beneath the soil. As the seed germinates, it is like the hose that is coiled at the base of the spine begins to rise up through the tube. And as it rises through the tube, it eventually makes it to the head. When it gets as far as the heart, something changes. The hose connects with the field of the heart, and our thoughts transform. Our antenna transforms from the straight, long antenna to the round microphone. We begin to understand the world differently. It's a holographic leap because now we are connected to everything and we understand the world from a more complex understanding of wholeness. Now back to the mechanics at the top of the head and the morphogenic butterfly, or that aquamarine color of the brain. And the exercise that we're doing when we lie down or when we wake or rise our energy in the morning, our awareness, lying in our bed still, with our arms at our side, our palms facing up and open, our heels touching, and our feet gently falling outwards. Connecting back in to the brain and experiencing it in this beautiful turquoise aquamarine color, like a magnet, drawing thought consciousness back to those bubbles of morphogenic fields we talked about, based on the strength of the energy that is flowing through us. The brain attracts different fields of thought in the color spectrum. The brain, the stronger our energy becomes, the more the brain attracts thought consciousness or bubbles from beyond the spectrum of light that we see with our eyes. These are the realms of higher thought consciousness. So the brain is attracting these morphogenic fields, these bubbles towards it, and that is what is passing our awareness, like little data packages. As soon as they make contact with our brain downloads the information. It opens up within us, and that's the thoughts that pass our awareness. So, this is a very important piece. We choose each miracle based on the frequency we are emanating from us, which bubbles, which data packets we are attracting towards us. When those data packets make contact, they open in our awareness, and then we are swimming in a sea of that thought consciousness. It's been downloaded to our awareness, to our brain, to our hard drive, and now we're having an experience in this holographic reality because we made contact with and accepted into our database a morphogenic field of thought. This is how the coding of our genes work. Each one of us has made contact through the cymatics of our blueprint with specific morphogenic fields of thought. And based on the frequency that we operate at, we have the capacity to open up higher vibrations of those data packages. It's like complex information. So when you first get a cell phone, you start with the basics. That would be the shadow frequency. Turn the phone on. Then, once you learn how to operate the basic functions, you move into a higher data packet. You start to discover more amazing things your phone can do. And when you move into the acidic frequency, you have become one with the phone such that you no longer need the phone to make contact or communion with the people in your phone book. Now you have the capacity to be the phone. it's kind of like that with the different frequencies of the gene. They're all levels of data packets. So, none of the fields, it's not good, bad, right, or wrong to start with the basics, learning to turn the phone on, the shadow frequency. It's learning the basics of the mechanics of the creation, mechanics of the Maya, the mechanics of the physical form, because that's what we are, is spirit in form. Discovering the mechanics to turn our light ships on. Flight Lessons 101. So the Siddhi, or the Siddhic frequency, is when we no longer require an external source of technology, even the body or the blueprint. The 60th gene says all structures are meant to be transcended, including our human form, including the world around us as we know it. These are great quantum leaps in consciousness. So we use simple metaphors to get handholds in our quantum field for the expansion of consciousness. So keeping in mind that when we rise our energy in the morning back to our conscious awareness of the external world, the first thing to check in on and perhaps to monitor is the thoughts we are allowing to pass our radar before we sit up in bed. Those very thoughts are the ones which will deeply influence the moments ahead. And for most people, that's called their day. We are the creators of our reality, and so it would seem that before we sit up, we would want to be certain that we were consciously aware of the thoughts and morphogenic fields that we have made contact with and that we are allowing to pass our awareness, because they will influence how we experience ourselves and our day. So, in the morning, what I like to do is a little Bikram's exercise, Bikram's yoga. In Bikrams, we stand with our feet 6 inches apart, and then we rise up onto our toes. Then we bring our knees together. We squeeze our knees together, but still the feet 6 inches apart and up on our toes. And then we lower ourselves down to the floor with our back as though it's sitting flat against the wall. I do this same exercise in the morning lying in bed. First, I move my feet 6 inches apart and point my toes. Then I bring my knees together while my feet are still apart. When we do this, we begin to feel a squeezing sensation in our thighs, our belly, our legs, our pelvis. They all come together in the area where the Kundalini is coiled at the base of the spine. So I place my awareness there and I squeeze everything together. The intrinsic muscles I pull inward and I press inward with my knees. And then I begin to just gently raise my knees. up towards my chest, but very slowly and subtly while still lying down. So I don't need to raise my knees very far to get in good touch with my Kundalini. And when I do, I squeeze more and I focus on my breath. In the central channel, I connect into that Kundalini that I feel in my Dantian and my root chakra. And I connect in with my breath and the squeezing of those intrinsic muscles. And then I focus on the top of my head, and just through the squeezing of the knees together and the thighs strong and the belly tight and the toes up on the tiptoes and the feet apart, I can feel my Kundalini rise through all the centers, through my heart. I can feel it rise through my throat. I can feel it rise through the back of my head, through the center and up to the top. And I just hold that position and allow it to happen effortlessly and easily, and witness the feeling of the Kundalini rising. I do this as many times as I feel to. And then I check in to see what fields of thought, what morphogenic bubbles I'm connecting in with. And I find that I am connecting in with joy and love and gratitude and vibrational energies that give me a wonderful start, so to speak, of the miracle of the day. This is me, Flight Lessons 101, choosing tools and techniques to create my reality consciously in ways that are fulfilling to me. May we all be blessed with beauty and wholeness as sovereign as we go about our miracle creation. Namaste. If this transmission is helpful, please share it. Aloha.